The second session that we've got on this afternoon is also been selected in the open submission category, but this presentation does not incorporate tracking data, so that means that there's no restrictions in place around anonymization or player and team names, which you would see in the tracking presentations. So this presentation is going to be delivered by 3 PhD students from the University of Edinburgh, Maia Trower, Niamh Graham and Yasmin Hengster. Niamh, Maia and Yasmin have been working with core player biographical data and Opta event data from the FA Women's Super League, going back multiple seasons, with the objective of establishing that there's a link between diversity and cohesion across WSL teams and individual players, and considers how this could strategically impact a club's approach to player recruitment. So again, as with the first presentation, if you have any questions, please use Slido throughout the talk, and I'll put them to the group at the end. But in the meantime, I'd like to hand over to Maia, who I think is going to lead, followed by Niamh and Yasmin. So please give them a warm welcome as they take to the stage.
Okay, hi, thank you for coming. Yeah, I'm Maia. I think Andy did a really good job summarising what we're about to present. So essentially we are analysing the impact of squad composition in terms of like player biographical information on the performance of those clubs, specifically in the WSL. And yeah, this work is joint work between the 3 of us. So we're all final year PhD students studying maths at the University of Edinburgh. And then we also kind of recently got into doing some football analytics on women's data, sort of just in our spare time. So at the moment, women's football is the fastest growing sport in the world. And this is kind of, we've really seen this in the UK after the Euros with like attendance records in the WSL being broken. And also globally, like transfer fees for women's football being broken, I think 3 times in the last 18 months. So at the moment, there's like more money in women's football than there ever has been before. And the amount of interest that we're seeing has really, really grown. But the problem is player pathways are still relatively underdeveloped compared to men's football. And so like smart decision making about squad composition, player recruitment, and the teams that you put on the pitch are really crucial. And, for example, like should teams invest in like early identification of talent and develop those players up through an academy, or should they be using that money to kind of, find like strong experienced players from like diverse backgrounds and pull those in to the squad? And I think, you can see the impact of these kind of data-driven decisions in the men's game, really driving forward some like, really innovative strategies and using the data really effectively. And mapping all of this modeling and these sort of, these insights directly from men's football into women's football is just not really, it kind of risks leaving women's football behind and just assuming the games are the same. And I think what we'd like to highlight a little bit is, there are differences, and this sort of analysis should be done, on the women's game as a separate kind of entity. So specifically what we'd like to address, is how squad composition and the biographical information of the players impacts the performance on the pitch of clubs in the WSL. So in particular, when we're talking about squad composition, what we're looking at in this project is how well the players on the pitch know each other, so how many minutes they've played together in common in the past. And also we're looking at diversity, and obviously diversity is a difficult thing to measure, but we also want to look at how people from different backgrounds come together into a team, and how well that translates into success and performance. And so we look at success in terms of where they finished in the league table in the WSL, and also all the way down to kind of event level, and how these like cohesive or diverse subgroups of players can create chances with high XG. And so just to briefly mention some key insights that we'll go into a bit more detail later, essentially what we found is that there is a positive correlation between cohesion, so how well the players know each other, and success, both in terms of like league position and also XG. And so what you can see on the left here is, so this is the top 3 teams in the WSL last season. And so the top 3 teams, the ones that perform really well and kind of got the most points in the league, also have very high cohesion. So they have, these players who've been playing together a lot over the past 4 or 5 seasons. And also when we look at expected goals, high cohesion also has this general positive trend when we average across teams as well. And so that, indicates that this strong player relationships actually do translate to success on the pitch, the way that we have measured it. So I'll now pass on to Niamh to talk about the methods.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the methods and the data that we used. To analyse performance, we used the 2022-23 season of WSL Opta data, which covered 314 players, 132 matches. The data covered event data, possession events, match statistics, which was match outcomes, substitutions, lineups, and squad information, which included nationality. To build up a picture of how often players had played together in the past, leading up to the 22-23 season, we used 4 seasons of match statistics data, so from the 2018-19 to the 2021-22 season. And we just wanted to highlight here that there's only 132 matches in each WSL season, which if we were using men's Premier League data, we would have 380 matches to analyse. So we just wanted to highlight the data limitations that we had. So it can be quite difficult in women's, when analysing women's football, to get meaningful insights with small amounts of data. In this project, we analysed performance on 3 different levels. So we started looking at whole squad, then like a team performance during a match, and then onto event level, so performance on the pitch. So starting with the squad performance, our success metric was how many points that squad got in the WSL 22-23 season. When we looked at team performance, the success metric was the match outcome, so win, loss, or draw. Then when we looked at performance on the pitch, we constructed these possession chains and looked at only possession chains which ended in a shot. And then our success metric was XG for that. So we wanted to connect these performance metrics to diversity and cohesion. The cohesion score gives us a description of how often players have played together in the past. And it's an average of these cohesion coefficients, so the CIJ here. Cohesion coefficient is how the proportion of player I's total minutes played that they played with player J. So if we were looking at the cohesion score between 2 players, we'd have the proportion of player I's total minutes played with player J, and the proportion of player J's total minutes played with player I. And we average those. And then looking at different groups of players, we take the sum of all the player relationships, cohesion scores, and average them. So we calculated these cohesion coefficients for all the players in the WSL 22-23 season to construct this cohesion matrix, which you can see on the right, and ordered the players by team. So you can see along the diagonal there's clusters of high cohesion within teams, and some teams have higher cohesion than others. So if you look at like Chelsea and Arsenal, have like a high density of yellow around where their team is. But teams like Liverpool, there's less yellow around there, so they might be less cohesive. So we just zoomed in to look at a selection of players from the Chelsea squad from the 22-23 season. And you can read the cohesion matrix through the columns. So if we look at the first column, this describes how the proportion of Bethany England's total minutes that she played with all these other players. So you can see that she played the majority of her minutes with Millie Bright, or Millie Bright was playing with her for most of her minutes, and the same with Magdalena Eriksson, whereas less of the minutes were played with Charles and Kirby. That's reflected in the fact that Bright and Eriksson have been in the squad for all 4 of the years that we computed this over, whereas Niamh Charles moved from Liverpool in the 2021 season, so her cohesion coefficients are relatively smaller. And then to compute diversity, we used a combination of age and nationality, which was quite restrictive, but we were just using like the data availability that we had. So we compute the diversity score by a weighted average between age standard deviation and the normalized number of nationalities in the squad, or in the team, or a group of players. So as an example here, we have a Chelsea lineup. So to compute the diversity score here, we'd take the standard deviation of all their ages and then compute the N hat, which would be the 6 nationalities out of the 11 players, so 6 over 11, and then take a weighted average. And for the rest of the analysis, we've just weighted these equally. So alpha and beta are a half, but these could be tweaked if one of the components is considered more important towards diversity. So I'm going to pass to Yasmin, who's going to talk through the results.
Yeah, we'll talk you through the results from our analysis and basically on the 3 different levels that Niamh introduced. And we're going to start with the squad performance, so how the teams performed in the last season of the WSL. And we see here a picture of Chelsea celebrating their win of the WSL last year. That meant that they had the highest points in the last season. And that's the metric we look at first. So we have on the y-axis here the points, and on the x-axis we have the cohesion score, how Niamh described it to calculate it. So basically how well these players know each other. And the legend is ordered in how they finished in the table. And what we can see, if we look at a plot, there's not really a clear trend, meaning that like cohesion would be beneficial or not. But if we then actually look at just the top 3 teams, so Chelsea, Manchester United and Arsenal, we can see that they're all in the top corner. And that means that if you have a high standing in the table, it's very likely that you have a high cohesion as well. So the players know each other well, they have played loads together, and that is then beneficial for team performance, or can be beneficial for team performance. We also looked at kind of the same plot, but for diversity. Looked at the diversity score across the squad and then how they performed in the last season. This plot shows, again, no clear trend. And if we now look at the top 3 teams again, we can actually see that there is no clear trend even for the top teams. And the top 3 teams really spread across the whole range of the diversity scores. We kind of have 2 potential ideas why that could be the case. One is just our measure of diversity. It's not maybe the most advanced measure. And then also Manchester United overperformed a little bit last season. So they came second, but the seasons before they didn't as well. So it might be that it's just an outlier the last season. But now that we have looked at the performance across the whole last season, we wanted to look at the match by match performance as well. And for that we looked at the different lineups of the different matches. And that is just now an example that we have of a Chelsea lineup and kind of how we calculate the cohesion score. So we basically have a lot of lines in this plot, but we didn't put them all in because then you couldn't see anything. But kind of the 2 maybe main points we wanted to point out is that you have this high score between Magdalena Eriksson and Millie Bright, who, as Niamh mentioned, they have been in a squad for a long time, so they loads together. And then Niamh Charles and Frank Darby have the lowest cohesion value in this specific lineup, but 0.2 is still a very high value, or considered a very high value for cohesion, if you just believe me for now. We were then, and we also calculated the diversity of these different lineups and also the substitutes that are not included in the plot, and then grouped the matches that a team has won and lost and calculated the average cohesion and diversity, and then built the difference between the 2 values. So what we see here in this plot is for the different teams, matches that a team won, the average value of that, and then the matches where they lost, the average of that, and then the difference is in this plot. And that means that a positive value in general means that a more cohesive team is more beneficial, so it's more likely to win, and a negative value, the opposite. So if you have, for example, a negative value for the diversity, that means that a less diverse team is more beneficial for you. And in general, what we can see for the 2 plots is that the cohesion on the left, in general, it is very beneficial for all teams to have, or for most teams to have, a higher cohesion, while for diversity, firstly, it's less important. We can see that the difference between the 2 values is smaller, and then for some clubs it's even the opposite. So we don't want a diverse lineup in the way we define it for your team. And we brought 2 examples that kind of stand out. So we have Chelsea, who became first in the last season, as I've mentioned before, And on each difference, they're always the highest. So for them, it's very beneficial to be cohesive and also diverse. And here it's maybe important to mention that they're not mutually exclusive. So the Chelsea lineup or like the standard starting 11 can be very cohesive. They have played together loads, but it can also be very diverse. So they have like a wide range in age and like a lot of different nationalities represented. The other example we brought with us is Arsenal. What we wanted to point out, which is very beneficial for them to have like a cohesive starting 11 where the players know each other well, but then they want a lower diversity level, so players of similar age and a lower national diversity as well. And then the last step we looked at was at a tactical level. So we looked at these possession chains that Niamh introduced at the start. So basically all passing networks resulting in a shot. And this is, again, an example. Put the values of the cohesion on the edges of between the different players, and that's how we calculate the cohesion score. And then we also calculated diversity of these 4 players, and that is how we measured it. We then, again, averaged over all possession chains per team to get these plots here. So on the left, we have the cohesion, how it relates to the XG of that possession chain. And on the right, we have the same for the diversity. And what we can see for cohesion, there is a slight positive trend. So yeah, it is when if you like players in that passing network have known each other for a long time, then it's more likely that you get a high XG. And then for diversity, we kind of see the opposite. So the higher your diversity is, the lower your XG would be. And what is also interesting here is that we see again the top 3 teams, even on that like event level data, have very high cohesion compared to the other teams. And then we also have Manchester United standing out on the like diversity level. We also calculated correlation coefficients between the 2 different cohesion and XG and diversity and XG, and we can see that they're roughly of the same order, but it's the low cohesion, low correlation, so there's not like a super clear correlation between, but there's a trend at least that we can see. And then we also brought a little video with us. That is the possession chain we saw in the plot before, where we just see how the players are comfortable with each other. It's like a kind of neat finish, and then resulting in right and scoring. And with that, I will hand over to Maia, who will tell you about our conclusions.
Yeah, so just to recap, we've just sort of analysed how like biographical data can be used to analyse the impact of diversity and cohesion on performance in the WSL. And when we looked at cohesion and how well players know each other, we can see that this like has a general like positive correlation with performance, both on like a league level all the way down to event level as well with XG. And this kind of approach can be seen, for example, in like Manchester City, who from the 2022 to 23 season to 2023-24 season, they only made 1 signing in the summer, otherwise kept their squad, pretty much exactly the same, and then managed to jump back up into the top 3 this season. And so, that seems to be working very well for them. When we looked at relationships between performance and diversity, the relationship is a bit more complicated, but what we did see is that on an event level, there's this negative correlation, and so it's perhaps beneficial to have these subsets of players who do have similar ages, similar kind of nationalities. But yeah, I think it's important to highlight here that our measure of diversity was like very limited by the data that we had available. Obviously, diversity is a much broader picture than just age and nationality, and I think that's something that's worth sort of diving into more and expanding the data set. I think that's something we'd like to do going forward for this. And also we'd like to kind of see how this extends beyond the WSL to other like domestic leagues and see if there's any kind of findings there as well. So that is everything we have. Thank you so much for your attention. If you have any questions, we will do our best to answer them, and you can also contact us by email if you'd like. Thank you very much.